On a cold, rainy night, the kind that seeped into bones and drowned hope, a homeless teenager named Jake shuffled through deserted streets, searching for shelter. His threadbare jacket offered little protection against the downpour, and his stomach growled louder than the thunder overhead. Life had been relentless, a cycle of hunger, rejection, and survival. But fate had other plans. As Jake turned a corner, his flashlight beam caught a glint of chrome. A sleek, stranded luxury car, its front tire flattened and windshield wipers thrashing helplessly against the storm. Jake hesitated. He could have kept walking, vanishing into the shadows where the world expected him to stay. But years of hardship hadn't stripped his decency. Kneeling in the mud, he grabbed the car's jack and spare tire, his numb fingers working tirelessly. Rain soaked through his clothes, but he didn't stop, not until the tire was changed and the driver, a sharp-dressed man with worry etched on his face, could safely speed away. Little did Jake know, that act of selflessness would unravel a chain of events no one saw coming. By sunrise, his life, and the cold, unfeeling streets he called home, would be transformed forever. Because sometimes, the universe rewards kindness in ways too extraordinary to predict. The rain lashed down in sheets, turning the streets into rivers as Jake knelt beside the stranded car. His fingers trembled, not just from the cold, but from exhaustion. He hadn't eaten in days, and every movement felt like lifting concrete. But the man inside the car was frantic, shouting into his phone about a missed meeting, a deal worth millions. Jake didn't care about the money. He cared about staying human in a world that kept telling him he wasn't. The spare tire was slick with mud, and the jack wobbled on the uneven road. Jake's hands slipped twice, skinning his knuckles raw. He gritted his teeth, ignoring the sting. The driver, Mr. Carter, watched through the window, first with suspicion, then disbelief. "You don't have to do this," he called out, but Jake kept working. For once, he wanted to prove he wasn't invisible, that he mattered. When the tire was finally secured, Jake stood back, soaked to the bone. Mr. Carter stepped out, his Italian shoes sinking into the mud. He pulled out his wallet, thick with cash. "Take it," he said, holding out a stack of bills. Jake stared at the money. It could buy him food, a motel room, maybe even a coat. But something inside him recoiled. "I didn't do it for that," he muttered, backing away. Mr. Carter frowned. "Then why?" Jake shrugged, his voice barely audible over the rain. "Because you needed help." The words hung in the air, heavy and unexpected. Before Mr. Carter could reply, Jake vanished into the shadows, leaving only footprints in the mud. The next morning, Jake awoke under a bridge, his body aching. But today was different. A black sedan idled nearby, its tinted window rolling down to reveal Mr. Carter. "I've been looking for you," he said. Jake's heart raced. Was he in trouble? Had the man changed his mind? But Mr. Carter's voice softened. "I want to repay you, not with money, with a chance." Jake hesitated. Chances were myths in his world. But Mr. Carter handed him a business card. "Meet me here tomorrow," he said. "No strings, just trust me." The car drove off, leaving Jake clutching the card like a lifeline. For the first time in years, hope flickered in his chest, but fear followed close behind. What if this was a cruel joke? What if he dared to believe, only to be shattered again? That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He replayed the moment in the rain, the tire, the money, the offer. By dawn, he'd made his choice. He washed his face in a gas station bathroom, straightened his torn shirt, and walked to the address on the card. The building towered over him, glass and steel glinting in the sun. His stomach churned. This wasn't his world. But he stepped inside anyway, because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk through a door you've been told is closed forever. Days later, a sleek black car pulled up to the abandoned warehouse Jake called home. The engine purred like a predator, and the doors opened to reveal Mr. Carter, flanked by two assistants carrying sleek briefcases. Jake's heart pounded. Was this it? The moment his hope would be crushed? But Mr. Carter's expression was soft, almost reverent. "I've been thinking about you," he said. "About what you did that night." Jake shifted uncomfortably, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. "It was just a tire," he muttered. Mr. Carter shook his head. "Number. It was more than that. You didn't ask for anything. You didn't even take the money. That's rare. Rarer than you know." He gestured to the car. "Get in. I want to show you something." Jake hesitated. Trust didn't come easy when life had taught you to expect betrayal. But something in Mr. Carter's eyes, a flicker of sincerity, made him climb into the back seat. The car glided through the city, past towering skyscrapers and bustling streets, until it stopped in front of a gleaming apartment building. "This," Mr. Carter said, "is yours." Jake froze. "What?" Mr. Carter smiled. "You heard me. A place to live, no strings attached. Consider it a thank you." Jake's mind raced. This had to be a joke, a cruel prank. But Mr. Carter handed him a set of keys, their weight solid and real. "Go on," he said. "Take a look." The apartment was breathtaking. Sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, a kitchen stocked with food, a bed so soft it felt like a cloud. Jake stood in the doorway, his chest tight. "I don't understand," he whispered. "Why are you doing this?" Mr. Carter's voice grew quiet. "Because the world needs more people like you," he said. "People who help without expecting anything in return." Tears welled in Jake's eyes. For years he'd been told he was worthless, a burden, a ghost. But here, in this moment, he felt seen. "Thank you," he said, his voice cracking. Mr. Carter clapped him on the shoulder. "Don't thank me yet. This is just the beginning." As the door closed behind Mr. Carter, Jake sank onto the couch, his mind spinning. He'd gone from sleeping under bridges to standing in a home of his own, all because he'd chosen to help a stranger in the rain. And as he looked out at the city skyline, he realized something profound. Sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness can unlock the biggest miracles. Jake stood in the doorway of the luxury apartment, keys trembling in his hand. The air smelled of fresh paint and possibility. For a moment he couldn't move, couldn't believe this was real, but Mr. Carter nudged him gently. "It's yours," he said. "No conditions, just a place to start over." Jake stepped inside, his worn sneakers sinking into plush carpet. A fully furnished living room, a kitchen stocked with food, a bedroom with sheets so crisp they felt like snow. He sat on the edge of the bed, tears streaming silently. For the first time in years, he felt safe. But Mr. Carter wasn't done. The next morning, he returned with an offer that would rewrite Jake's future. "I want you to work at my company," he said. "Start as an intern. Learn the ropes, build something." Jake's throat tightened. "Why me?" Mr. Carter smiled. "Because you didn't just fix a tire. You reminded me what decency looks like. And that's worth investing in." The job wasn't charity. Jake threw himself into it, arriving early, staying late, his hunger replaced by purpose. He learned logistics, shadowed executives, and discovered a knack for problem solving. Within months, he was promoted. Not because of Mr. Carter's guilt, but because he'd earned it. Colleagues who once eyed his thrift store clothes now sought his advice, and every paycheck, every small victory, felt like a fist raised to the sky. Yet the greatest change wasn't the apartment or the job, it was the quiet moments. The first time he cooked a meal in his own kitchen, the warmth of a bed that didn't smell of damp concrete, the way strangers nodded to him on the street, not past him. He kept a photo of his old sleeping spot under the bridge, taped to the fridge, a reminder, a compass. One evening, Mr. Carter found Jake working late, the office empty. "You don't have to prove anything anymore," he said. Jake looked up, his voice steady. I'm not proving it to you. I'm proving it to me. Mr. Carter nodded, pride flickering in his eyes. Then keep going. The world's yours now. Years later, Jake stood at a podium in that same office building, accepting an award for mentorship. His speech was simple. Kindness is a language everyone understands. I'm here because someone spoke it to me when I needed it most. Now it's my turn to pass it on. In the crowd, a young intern scribbled notes, her eyes wide with hope. As for the apartment, Jake still lives there. But he's turned the second bedroom into a sanctuary for teens like he once was, kids with nowhere to go. The walls are covered in their art, their dreams, and on stormy nights when rain pelts the windows, Jake sits by the fire, Buddy, the stray dog he adopted, at his feet. He thinks of that cold, desperate evening, the flat tire, the choice that changed everything, and he whispers, to no one but the universe, thank you. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness can spark a chain reaction of life-changing events. Jake's story reminds us that no matter how tough life gets, there's always a chance for a brighter tomorrow. And sometimes, it starts with a flat tire. That rainy night, when Jake knelt in the mud to help a stranger, he didn't just fix a car. He fixed a broken piece of the world. Today, Jake's life is a testament to the power of compassion. From the cold, unforgiving streets to the warmth of a home he can call his own, his journey proves that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear tattered jackets and carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. And sometimes they're just ordinary people who choose to do extraordinary things. So the next time you see someone in need, remember Jake. Remember that every act of kindness, no matter how small, has the power to change a life. Because in a world that often feels divided, it's the helpers, the ones who stop, who care, who give, who light the way forward,